The United States Supreme Court, the highest judicial authority in the nation, is now at the center of a legal and political storm that could have far-reaching consequences for the country and the world. The justices are preparing to hear arguments in a pivotal case that challenges the very foundation of President Trump's sweeping global tariffs, a case that could ultimately dismantle the trade barriers he put in place during his administration. At the heart of the dispute is a fundamental question. Did the president overstep his authority by invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to justify these tariffs? The law was originally designed to give the president special powers during times of genuine national emergency. But critics argue it was never meant to be used as a tool for broad economic policy. The outcome of this case could dramatically redefine the balance of power between the White House and Congress, setting a precedent for how much control the executive branch has over international trade. The stakes are high, not just for politicians, but for the global economy, as the decision could ripple through markets and affect trading relationships worldwide. Critics of the tariffs argue that these measures have disrupted global supply chains, making it harder for businesses to get the materials they need and causing prices to rise for everyday goods. They point to empty shelves, higher costs at the checkout, and increased uncertainty for both consumers and companies. On the other hand, supporters of the tariffs claim that these tough trade policies are necessary to protect American jobs and industries from unfair foreign competition. They argue that by leveling the playing field, the tariffs have helped revitalize manufacturing and given American workers a fighting chance. Now, the Supreme Court must weigh these competing arguments and decide whether this aggressive trade strategy can persist, or if it crosses a constitutional line. If the court rules against the president, billions of dollars in tariffs could be invalidated overnight, forcing a dramatic shift in U.S. trade policy and potentially lowering costs for businesses and consumers alike. Such a decision would not only reshape America's approach to international trade, but also send a powerful message to future presidents about the limits of executive power. This case is more than just a legal battle over tariffs. It's a test of how far presidential authority can reach and whether Congress should have a stronger say in shaping the nation's economic destiny. For millions of Americans, the outcome will have real-world consequences, influencing the prices they pay, the jobs they hold, and the stability of their communities. As the nation awaits the Supreme Court's decision, one thing is clear. This ruling will be a defining moment, shaping the country's economic direction and the very nature of presidential power for years to come. At the heart of this high-stakes legal battle lies the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, a pivotal law that has shaped the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches for decades. The IEEPA was enacted in 1977, during a time of global uncertainty, to give the president the authority to respond swiftly to national emergencies that threaten the United States' economic stability or security. But the scope and limits of this power have always been a subject of intense debate. Under IEEPA, the president can regulate commerce, freeze assets, and restrict trade with foreign entities when a national emergency is declared. This authority is meant to be a tool for targeted, temporary action, one that allows the executive branch to act decisively in times of crisis without waiting for lengthy legislative processes. Historically, presidents have used IEEPA to impose sanctions on specific countries, individuals, or organizations that pose a threat to U.S. interests. However, the Trump administration took an unprecedented step by invoking IEEPA to justify sweeping global tariffs, affecting a vast array of goods and trading partners. This broad application marked a significant departure from past practice, raising questions about the intended limits of presidential power. Critics and challengers argue that this expansive use of IEEPA oversteps the president's constitutional authority, encroaching on Congress's exclusive power to regulate foreign and interstate commerce. They contend that allowing the executive branch to unilaterally impose tariffs undermines the system of checks and balances that is fundamental to American democracy. In response, the administration maintains that its actions are not only legal but necessary to protect the nation's economic interests from evolving global threats. Supporters argue that the president must have the flexibility to act quickly in a rapidly changing world, where economic security is often intertwined with national security. This case brings to the forefront a fundamental constitutional debate. Should the president possess such sweeping authority over trade policy, or should Congress retain its traditional role as the primary architect of the nation's economic relationships? Legal scholars and policymakers are divided, with some warning that unchecked executive power could set a dangerous precedent. Now, the Supreme Court faces the critical task of determining whether the president's use of IEEPA in this context is a legitimate response to genuine economic threats, or an overreach that violates the Constitution's separation of powers. The justices must weigh the need for executive agility against the risk of undermining congressional authority. The outcome of this case will have far-reaching implications, not only for the current administration, but for all future presidents and lawmakers. It will clarify the boundaries between presidential initiative and congressional oversight in shaping modern trade policy, and could redefine how the United States responds to economic emergencies on the global stage. Ultimately, the Supreme Court's decision will set a powerful precedent, guiding the actions of future presidents and shaping the legal landscape for executive authority in times of crisis. The eyes of the nation, and the world, are watching closely. As the justices deliberate, the ruling they deliver will define the limits of presidential power in economic matters for generations to come, ensuring that the delicate balance between executive action and congressional authority remains at the core of American governance. During oral arguments, justices from both sides expressed skepticism about the administration's broad interpretation of IEEPA. Even Trump's appointees questioned the unprecedented use of the law for global tariffs. Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Gorsuch raised concerns about unchecked presidential power. The justices doubted the claim that tariffs were purely regulatory, given the billions collected. This skepticism suggests the court is wary of expanding executive power in trade. The administration faces a challenging path to justify its actions to the court. If the Supreme Court rules against the Trump administration's tariffs, the consequences could be far-reaching and complex. Such a decision would not only require the government to process potentially billions of dollars in refunds to importers, but it would also create significant logistical and administrative hurdles. Agencies would need to review thousands of cases, determine eligibility, and coordinate payments, all while managing public scrutiny and political fallout. The ruling could set a precedent for how future trade disputes are handled at the highest level of the judiciary. For many businesses, especially those that rely on imported goods and materials, this would be a welcome relief. The removal of tariffs could ease financial pressures, allowing companies to reinvest in growth, hire more workers, and potentially pass savings on to consumers. Lower costs for manufacturers and retailers might translate into reduced prices on everyday products, from electronics to clothing, making goods more affordable for American families. However, not everyone would benefit equally. Industries that have thrived under tariff protections, such as steel, aluminum, and certain manufacturing sectors, could suddenly find themselves exposed to increased foreign competition. This could lead to difficult adjustments, including potential layoffs or plant closures, as companies struggle to adapt to a more competitive global market. In response, the administration might seek alternative legal strategies to maintain some form of protection for domestic industries. This could involve pursuing new trade agreements, enacting different types of tariffs, or working with Congress to pass new legislation. The legal and political battles over trade policy would likely intensify, with both sides seeking to shape the future of American economic policy. For American workers and consumers, the effects would be mixed. While some families could benefit from lower prices and increased purchasing power, others, especially those employed in industries that lose tariff protections, might face job insecurity or wage pressures. The ripple effects would be felt in communities across the country, from factory towns to big cities. Lower prices at the checkout could help stretch household budgets. But the threat of job losses in certain sectors could create anxiety and uncertainty for many workers. Policymakers would need to consider how best to support those affected, possibly through retraining programs or targeted economic assistance. Ultimately, the Supreme Court's decision will have a lasting impact on America's trade strategy and economic stability. It will influence how future administrations approach trade disputes and shape the legal boundaries of executive power in economic policy. The outcome will not only redefine the landscape of U.S. trade policy, but also send a powerful message to global trading partners about America's commitment to fair and lawful trade practices. Despite skepticism, the Trump administration remains publicly confident in its legal stance. Treasury Secretary Bessent projects optimism, while contingency plans are quietly prepared. The administration explores alternative legal paths to sustain its trade agenda. President Trump frames the case as crucial for national economic survival. This dual approach reflects determination to uphold high tariffs, regardless of the court's decision. The administration is ready to adapt its strategy to maintain its trade objectives. Business leaders like Warren Buffett value stability and predictability, disrupted by broad tariffs. A ruling limiting presidential tariff power would likely be welcome for restoring trade stability. Multinational corporations would appreciate a return to a rules-based system. However, industries protected by tariffs might face challenges from increased competition. Business leaders seek clarity and a durable legal framework for long-term planning. The Supreme Court's decision will influence investment strategies and economic growth. The outcome will shape the business landscape and trade dynamics. The tariff case unfolds amid complex U.S. trade policy developments. A temporary trade truce with China highlights the administration's use of tariffs as leverage. This dual approach creates uncertainty for businesses navigating global markets. The Supreme Court's decision will impact America's economic strategy and global role. Recent unrelated court rulings show the judiciary's influence on policy changes. The economy faces competing forces of nationalism and global interdependence. The ruling will be a pivotal moment in defining America's trade future. The decision will reflect broader economic and political dynamics. As the nation waits for the Supreme Court's ruling, uncertainty looms over the economy. A decision upholding the tariffs would solidify executive power and the current trade environment. Striking down the tariffs could lead to new legal challenges and policy shifts. The ruling will affect consumer prices, job security, and economic stability. This case raises fundamental questions about presidential power and congressional authority. The decision will set a precedent for future trade and foreign policy. Americans should care about this case for its impact on their lives and democracy. The ruling will be a turning point in America's economic and political landscape.